She spent nearly $60,000 getting the house ready. New quartz, freestanding tub, smart everything. 84 days on the market, 3 price drops, and not one written offer. The neighbor across the street spent about $2,300, listed 9 days later, and closed in 9. Same block, same schools, same square footage, one retirement runway hanging on a single income, and a move that could not wait another season. So what did the neighbor do that she didn't? Which upgrade actually hurt the sale? And why did every single buyer mention the same detail? Here is what happened. Let me tell you about a homeowner I want you to picture. I am going to call her Marlene, though she is a composite of dozens of sellers I have watched make the exact same set of decisions in slightly different rooms. Mid-60s, widowed about 4 years ago, 32 years in the same 1970s ranch on a quiet block where most of the houses look similar from the curb. She wanted to move closer to her grandchildren. She had one income, a pension she needed to protect, and a very reasonable belief that money in equals money out. That belief is where the trouble starts. Not because she is careless, because she is careful. Careful sellers are the ones who overspend because they are trying to do everything right. She sat down with a legal pad, listed every room that felt tired, and set out to make the house buyer ready. Which sounded like wisdom, and which cost her the strongest selling window of the year. Here is the part I need you to sit with. Renovated homes do not automatically sell faster. Sometimes they sell slower. Sometimes they do not sell at all. And when they do sell, the check at closing can be smaller than if the seller had done almost nothing. That is the promise of this whole conversation. 10 common updates that will not put $1 in your pocket at closing, and in some cases will pull dollars out. Not because you did the work badly, because the market did not ask for it. Marlene's block sits in what agents call a mid-tier neighborhood. Comps in the last 12 months landed between about $280,000 and $315,000. That is the ceiling. That number is not a suggestion. It is a wall built by buyer expectations, appraisal comps, and the lending that supports both. And this is where update number 1 enters the story. The kitchen. She spent close to $28,000 on it. Full custom cabinetry with soft close everything, a waterfall quartz island, a pot filler above the range, under cabinet lighting on a smart switch. It looked, honestly, gorgeous. Her contractor talked her from a $15,000 refresh into what he called a forever kitchen. Her son loved it. Her sister said she would have paid extra for it. Then it hit the market inside a $300,000 comp range, and something strange happened. Buyers walked in and looked confused. Not delighted, confused. Because the kitchen belonged in a house 40% more expensive. The rest of the ranch was a 1970s interior that had not been touched. Original hallway, original bathrooms, original everything else, and the buyers who could afford the kitchen were shopping in a different price bracket entirely, in a different neighborhood, looking for that kitchen inside a house that matched it. The buyers who could afford Marlene's price bracket looked at that kitchen and did the math backward. They assumed the price must be inflated to pay for it, and they walked. That is what I mean by breaking the neighborhood ceiling. You cannot buy your way past a comp range. The market will not follow you. 3 weeks in, the listing had 31 showings and 0 written offers. 3-1, 0. That ratio is a scream. It means people are looking, which is good. It also means people are leaving, which is data. Feedback came back in almost identical language from 3 different buyer agents. Beautiful kitchen. Feels like too much house for the block. Concerned about pricing given the rest of the interior. Wonderful updates, but scale does not match. Those are feedback patterns I hear again and again, not verbatim quotes from any single file. Here is the moment where most sellers make a mistake I want you to avoid. Marlene looked at that feedback and reached for the wrong lever. She thought the problem was price. She dropped it $15,000, which sounds decisive, which felt like taking action, which did almost nothing. Why? Because a $15,000 drop from $305 to $290 did not land her in a new search bracket. Buyers filter by price bands: under $300, under $275, under $250. A drop that stays inside the same band does not surface the listing to a fresh audience. It just tells the audience already looking that you are willing to negotiate. So we come to the decision point. Is the house overpriced, or is it overimproved? Because those are two different problems with two very different solutions. And most sellers, and honestly most agents, assume it is the first one when the evidence points to the second. The primary bathroom is a version of the same story with a different face. Update number 2. Marlene had put in a freestanding soaker tub, hex tile in a deep navy, black matte fixtures, and a rain shower behind a frameless glass panel. It photographed like a magazine. It also sat inside a house priced for buyers who mostly wanted a functional tub shower combo and neutral finishes their kids could grow up around. Watch what happens next, because this is the buyer behavior part I really want you to see. A buyer opens the listing on their phone in bed at 11 at night. They swipe through photos in about 7 seconds each. They see that bathroom. Their brain does not think, how beautiful. Their brain thinks, not my taste. And then they do the thing that costs sellers real money. They mentally subtract the cost of ripping it out. That is not fair. It is not rational. It is what happens. Bold personal design triggers a rip-out calculation in buyers who cannot picture themselves in that room. Which means the $12,000 in that bathroom did not just fail to add $12,000 to the sale. It quietly subtracted the imagined removal cost from the offers she did receive. That is the mechanism. It is invisible on the invoice. It is very visible on the counteroffer. Neutral finishes are boring. Boring sells. I know that is not what you wanted to hear if you are already halfway through a color-drenched primary suite, but it is the honest number. Now the third one, and this is the one I want everyone who is thinking about it to hear twice: the garage conversion. Marlene's late husband had converted the 2-car garage into a home office with insulation, drywall, a mini-split, and built-in bookshelves. Beautiful workspace, cost around $15,000 at the time, and when the listing went up, the assumption was that adding usable interior square footage would raise the value. Here is what actually happens. Search filters. Buyers on every major listing site can filter by garage. Some filter by minimum garage spaces. Some filter by any garage. When Marlene's listing showed 0 garage spaces, an entire slice of the buyer pool never saw the home at all. Not saw it and passed. Never saw it. Filtered out before the first photo loaded. And the buyers who did see it fell into 2 camps. The remote work camp who liked the office, and the practical camp who needed somewhere to park a car in winter, store lawn equipment, or run a small side hustle out of a workshop. That second camp is bigger than most sellers want to admit. In many markets, it is the majority. So the garage conversion did 3 things at once. It removed a feature buyers filter for. It added a feature only some buyers want. And it made the house harder to unconvert, because now the seller has to disclose the change, and any new buyer has to imagine ripping the office back out and installing a garage door. That is a rip-out calculation twice over. This is the update I see hurt sale outcomes more consistently than almost any other. Please, if you are considering it, talk to a local agent about the specific buyer profile in your zip code before you touch that garage. Now let me stop and tell you about a completely different seller, because I want you to see the other side. I will call her a retired teacher on the same block. Composite again. Illustrative. She sold 3 months after Marlene listed. She spent, all in, about $4,000. Here is what she did. She hired 2 college kids to move every non-essential piece of furniture out to a storage unit. She painted 3 rooms in a single warm off-white. She replaced the front door hardware, the porch light, and the mailbox. She hired a professional photographer for one afternoon. She had a plumber fix a slow drip in the guest bathroom. That was it. She listed at the right number and had 2 offers in a week. Now watch this next part, because inside her story hide updates number 4 and 5. Update 4 is what she did not do. Her son had pushed her to knock down a wall between a small 3rd bedroom and the primary to create a giant primary suite with a walk-in closet. She almost did it. She listened when her agent said no, because in her comp range, a 3-bedroom sells faster and appraises better than a 2-bedroom with a spa retreat, no matter how gorgeous the retreat is. Removing a bedroom to enlarge another one destroys value in most family price markets. Search filters again. Buyers with kids filter by bedroom count first. Update 5 is what she also did not do. She had an old enclosed porch on the back that a neighbor was pushing her to finish, insulate, and add to her square footage total. Here is where it gets specific to your state, and please verify this with a local appraiser and your permit office. In most jurisdictions, an appraiser cannot count square footage that is not heated, permitted, and finished to code. If she had spent $20,000 on that porch and skipped the permit, she would have paid for square footage the appraisal would not recognize. 0 return. Sometimes worse than 0, because now there is a disclosure question and a permit history problem. I want you to hold 3 questions in your head every time you consider a pre-sale project. Does it make the house look better? Does it make the house easier to sell? Does it return more money than it costs? Those are 3 different questions. They are not the same question. Sellers lose money because they answer question 1 and assume they have answered all 3. Update number 6 lives right in that trap, the in-ground pool. If you are in a cold winter market, or a market where pool maintenance and insurance are a known ongoing cost, a pool can look spectacular in summer photos and still narrow your buy-a pool at closing. Families with small children see a liability. Retirees see a monthly cost. Insurance premiums often adjust. And in colder climates, half the year the pool is a covered tarp with a fence around it, which is not what the summer photos suggested. I am not saying never install a pool. I am saying never install a pool the year you plan to sell. And if you already have one, do not sink another $8,000 or $10,000 into resurfacing it right before you list. You will almost certainly not see it back. Update number 7 is the cousin. Elaborate landscaping, custom stonework, ornamental beds, a koi pond, a pergola with climbing vines. Gorgeous. Photographs like a lifestyle magazine, and the next owner sees a maintenance bill they did not want. Buyers do not pay a premium for someone else's hobby garden. They pay a small premium for clean, healthy, low-maintenance curb appeal. The gap between those 2 things is thousands of dollars you will not recover. Here is where it gets serious, because updates 8 and 9 can actively kill a deal, not just fail to add value. Number 8. Solar panels. If you own them outright, paid in cash, you generally have a cleaner story to tell buyers and lenders. If you finance them, and this is publicly documented as a growing issue in resale nationwide, you have entered a world where the buyer's lender has to review the solar loan or lease. The buyer has to agree to assume that debt, and any lien attached to the panels, has to be resolved before closing. I have watched deals collapse at the 11-hour mark over solar assumability, not because the panels were bad, because the paperwork was complicated and the buyer got nervous. If you are considering installing solar in the last 2 or 3 years before selling, please read your installer contract. understand the assumability terms in writing, and talk to a local lender before you sign. This is one of the fastest growing sources of contract friction I see, and it varies by state and installer. Number 9 is smaller in dollars and sneaky in impact. Bold wallpaper, statement walls, feature paint in emerald green, deep terracotta, or matte black. These trends photograph beautifully on design accounts. They also cost the next owner 2 coats of primer and 3 days of labor per room to neutralize. And here is the thing, that neutralization cost gets subtracted from your offer, not from the buyer's future budget. It shows up on the counteroffer as seller credit for paint, or it shows up as a lower opening offer, or it shows up as buyers who never write an offer at all, because they scrolled the photos, felt overwhelmed, and moved on. Bold is expensive to remove. Neutral is nearly free to live with. Now let us come back to Marlene. She had lived with all of this for 6 weeks. 31 showings, no offers, 1 price drop that did nothing, a growing pile of carrying costs, and a very real fear that she was going to miss the spring window and be sitting on the house through the summer. That is when we did a full walkthrough with fresh eyes. 3 things jumped out immediately. First, the beautiful new kitchen looked strange against the original hallway that led to it. The contrast made the untouched rooms feel more tired than they actually were. Second, the personalized bathroom dominated the first 10 listing photos, which meant a buyer's first impression was Marlene's taste, not their own future. Third, and this is the one nobody had mentioned in 6 weeks of feedback, there was a visible dark streak on the roofline in the first exterior photo, just a stain from a slow gutter. But in a listing photo, it read as water damage. Buyers were looking at that stain and imagining a roof problem. And then there was update number 10, sitting in every room. The smart home stack, smart thermostat, smart locks, smart lighting, smart blinds, smart smoke detectors, smart doorbell, all wired to a single hub. She had spent about $4,000 on it over 2 years. Here is the honest truth about smart home upgrades before selling. Most buyers either do not want them and plan to strip them out, or want a different ecosystem entirely and will replace them. Either way, that $4,000 is not coming back. And the disclosure conversation about which devices convey and which do not can slow the contract. I want to be honest with you about the conversation Marlene and I actually had, because this is the part sellers never talk about. When I told her that the answer was not another renovation but a strategic reset, she cried. Not sad tears, angry tears. She felt like the advice was calling her decisions foolish. She felt like doing less was surrender. She felt like the kitchen was for her late husband, and pulling attention away from it was disrespectful. That resistance is normal, and it is expensive if you let it run the show. Pricing advice is not an insult to your home. Depersonalizing photos is not erasing your family. Neutralizing a wall is not admitting defeat. It is entering a search bracket where actual buyers can find you. Here is the strategy we settled on, and this is where the $2,300 number in the hook comes from. Fix the roof stain and clean the gutter. Repaint the primary bathroom and the accent wall in the living room in a neutral warm white. Replace the front door with a solid warm-colored door and update the porch fixtures. Rent a small storage unit and move about 1/3 of the furniture out. Reshoot the entire listing with a professional photographer using new lead photos that showcase the layout, not the taste. Reprice with intention into a bracket that would surface the listing to a new pool of buyers. If you are a homeowner listening to this and you feel a little overwhelmed by all of it, here is my honest, non-pushy suggestion. Before you spend a single dollar on updates, ask a local agent for 2 things in writing: a comparative market analysis for your zip code, and a repair priority list ranked by what actually moves offers. Those 2 documents together will save you more money than any renovation. It does not replace an inspector, an appraiser, or a lender for the technical questions. It replaces guessing. Total out-of-pocket for Marlene's reset came in just under $3,500, including the paint, the storage unit for 2 months, the door and hardware, the plumber, the professional photography, and a small gutter repair. That was it. No new counters, no new bathroom, no new anything expensive. Why should this work? 3 reasons, and they matter in this order. First, the roof stain fix removes an imagined future expense from buyer heads. A buyer who does not fear a roof problem writes a stronger opening offer. Second, the paint and depersonalization allow buyers to see themselves in the house instead of seeing Marlene in the house. That shift matters more than any single expensive upgrade. Third, the new price entered a search band buyers were actually filtering into. That is the invisible one. That is the one price drops rarely accomplish, because sellers drop inside their existing band instead of past its edge. What risk remained? The appraisal was still going to reflect the neighborhood ceiling. A cash offer or a strong down payment would help. Inventory could shift week to week. Nothing is guaranteed. I want to be very clear about that because I have watched too many videos promise sellers a clean outcome and then quietly not deliver it. And here is what would have happened if she had ignored all of this. Best estimate, another 45 days on market. 2 more mortgage payments and 2 more utility cycles. A missed spring window pushing her into the softer summer. And a very real possibility of a stale listing perception that would have cost her thousands more in eventual negotiation. Doing nothing has a price. It is just harder to see on the invoice. She relisted on a Thursday. 2 offers by Sunday. The first offer came in at nearly full asking. That one collapsed during inspection over a real issue, an aging HVAC system with a cracked heat exchanger that had to be disclosed and repaired. Not a cosmetic issue, a real one. And that is important because the buyer had a legitimate reason to walk. The second offer came in about $11,000 under asking, which sounded worse but netted more than the expensive plan would have projected after the carrying costs and the money she had almost spent on another round of upgrades. She closed inside 4 weeks. She moved to a smaller home 20 minutes from her grandchildren. She kept her pension untouched. She did not carry 2 mortgages. She did not spend the summer running showings while trying to pack up 32 years of memories. I want to name the conditions honestly, because this is not a promise it will play out the same way for you. Local inventory was tight that month. Interest rates had softened slightly the week she relisted. Her block had 2 recent comps close under similar terms. The photographer she hired understood how to shoot a small ranch. And she was willing, finally, to price into the bracket the market told her existed rather than the one she wanted. Take away any of those conditions and the result changes. That is real estate. If you are watching this and you are not selling for another year or 2 or 5, this is the video I want you to save. Because most of the money sellers lose is spent long before the sign goes in the yard. It is spent on updates chosen from personal preference and family opinion, without ever asking whether the buyers in that specific price band, in that specific zip code, in that specific season, actually want them. Ask before you spend. Separate maintenance from marketability. A leaking roof is maintenance. A designer bathroom is marketability. And marketability is a market question, not a taste question. Learn the price bracket the market has assigned to your house before you decide which bracket you want to be in. Wanting is not the same as being. The smartest seller I have ever watched work through a difficult market was not the one with the biggest budget. It was the one who asked the most questions before writing the first check. Preparing does not force you to sell. Asking questions early does not commit you to a timeline. You are not obligated to renovate the house you already own for a buyer you have not yet met. And the goal is not a perfect house. Perfect is expensive, exhausting, and often invisible to the person actually writing the check. The goal is a house priced honestly, presented cleanly, maintained where it matters, and offered to the buyers who can actually see themselves in it. That is the whole game. That is where the money is. Marlene spent $60,000 trying to sell a house. What actually sold it cost less than $3,500. If you learn nothing else from this, learn that ratio. The smartest seller is almost never the one who spent the most.